Let's Get To presents Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
Alvarez 2 for 4 tonight, the 0-1. And Alvarez belts it deep to right field. Distant goodbye. Unbelievable. The Astros a walk-off win. Yordan Alvarez a walk-off 3-run homer. And the Astros stun the Mariners in Game 1 of the division series. Incredible. A miraculous comeback for Houston. Astros win it 8-7. Can you believe it?
That's right, folks. This is Go Astros, and you just watched and heard, if you're watching the show, for about the 1,000th time, Yordan Alvarez's home run, complete with Robert Ford's call. You'll notice that I'm wearing my favorite Astros shirt. This is my Astros Star Wars Night shirt because, you know what? Yordan's a Jedi Knight, and he has no delusions of grandeur. Speaking of no delusions of grandeur, Andy Tom Cheston's here. Brian Arbor's here. Brian, I want to go with you first because, again, you are the analytical guy of all of this. What was your reaction and when the ball, first of all, when it was off the bat, because it was a rocket?
You know, there was this anticipation, right, that, you know, if we get to this inning, we get a couple guys on, we can get Yordan up, and maybe, just maybe, and it got to that situation. You saw the Mariners worried about that because they had Robbie Ray warming up and brought him into the game, stretching out the drama. And then you had that first pitch that he missed. It was right there that he was all over. And then he got another pitch in an even better spot. And goodness, that is an aesthetically beautiful swing, particularly when it makes perfect contact like it did there. So, at one point in watching, when they showed the replay, I started just cackling in my living room. And my 10-year-old said something like, "Dad, I've never heard you laugh at baseball before." And so that's just where I am right now with my joy.
I love it. Andy, how about you? I know you had a different experience because to think people spoiler alerted you, right? Or didn't spoiler alert you.
Yeah, so I was watching at work and left right before Bregman hit his home run because I needed to get out and beat traffic. And frankly, it was kind of a depressing place at that point around here. So changed things up. As I was driving, Bregman hit his home run, but it's still 2 runs. And then, you know, it felt kind of middling. So I took my dog for a walk. I then proceeded to scare my dog. First of all, when you're listening to the MLB app, everything's on almost a 2-minute delay.
Yeah.
It's not even close to being in real time anymore. So I'm walking the dog and I'm following game track, listening to Robert Ford and trying not to kill my dog walking down city streets of Houston. And right before Alvarez even gets up, you see Ray's been put in. All right, we've got a chance. This is not a great matchup for Seattle. And then all of a sudden, I get bombarded with text messages and alerts from the evidently 13 different sports things I have on my phone. And it's not just one. MLB sent out 3 different alerts. Fox News or Fox Sports sent out 4 or 5 different alerts. I mean, it just was nonstop, and I couldn't hear the call because it kept getting interrupted on my AirPods. Technology sucked yesterday for me.
Yeah.
And what's even worse is tomorrow, evidently, I have to walk a dog for like 4 hours.
I mean, that is the truth. And I didn't. Oh my God, I have to go to Whataburger for breakfast. Oh man, this is not going to be any better. Brian, you talk a lot, and I agree with you on this one that momentum in baseball is the next day starting pitcher. However, the vibe I got watching Scott Service walk out of the dugout was like, if you come for the champ, you better knock the champ down. That was their best chance to knock the champ down. There has to be an emotional letdown, right? For everything they wanted to have happen for 8 2/3 happened.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter.
And it would be one thing, I think, had they lost, 7-1, Verlander shoved, and just go like, well, they had Verlander and we didn't, but we got Castillo the next game and we got our ace. And, I think it's very different because it's 8 2/3 of, we're going to win this game. We're going to beat Verlander. We're going to win at Minute Maid Park where we never win. We're going to, oh God, I hate these guys.
Andy, my favorite part of the follow-up was Steve Sparks going, the house of horrors for the Mariners continues. I mean, how do you pick yourself up after this? I think the Astros would have, if they lost, would have been fine.
Well, the Astros have literally the last 6 years of experience to fall back on with these guys going into 2017. I'm not doing my math right. It's 5 years. Anyway, they have that. So losing a game one, while not ideal in a 5-game series, isn't a death knell necessarily. It does move the percentages quite a bit, though. Had Mariners won, and teams that win the first game tend to win 72%, I think I read, of those series. So it's not great to lose that first game. I think that for the Mariners, though, it's better that they have today off than having to jump right back in and face Fromber, which is what they're going to face tomorrow. I think you get a day to calm down, a day to relax. I think that actually plays better for the Mariners than it does for the Astros. Now, having said that, it's got to be in their heads a little bit that this is a place where we just don't win games. And I think they've won like 7 of the last 39 games or something like that. It's some ridiculous number. Yeah. So it's not just a this year thing. It's not just the last 2 years thing. It's literally since, I mean, it's been going on for a while. Having said that, the Mariners are young. They are mostly resilient. And with that youngness comes a little bit of naivete and arrogance that I think they'll be able to brush it off. But I like Fromber being the guy that's there, especially knowing that ground balls are his friends, and he's got an approach that I don't think the Mariners necessarily play well against.
Yeah, we actually talked about that right on Monday, is that the Mariners hit home runs, and it's hard to do that if you're hitting it on the ground. It's interesting because I kind of differ with you, Andy, on that. I actually think the Mariners came in with this sort of, they had the dramatic comeback against Toronto, which is not all that different than what they had happened to them yesterday, and then dominated the game. I almost wonder, how do you come back from that and now you have the extra day of hearing the pundits talk about it, hearing about that 80% chance now you're going to lose, hearing about Scott Servais is a terrible manager for bringing in Robbie Ray. And I almost wonder if it's too long of a layover.
Well, Scott Servais is probably a lousy manager. And I was very tickled by I read the Athletic article because I'm waiting for my subscription to die since they don't actually cover the Astros anymore.
Right.
Reading a really good article about the game yesterday, and then the comments, and the best comment I saw, the Astros investment in a lousy catcher 30 years ago has finally paid off. So agent Servais finally paid off. Did the most boneheaded thing he could possibly do and bring in not only a starting pitcher in a closing role, which I don't think ever really works, but bringing in a guy who has not pitched necessarily well this year, has not pitched well against the Astros, and did not pitch well against Toronto 3 days ago. It was just a head scratcher all around, other than lefty on lefty. And even then, Yordan Alvarez hits lefties like a 320 clip. It's just not, it was weird. He rolled the dice and it did not come up well for him. Snake eyes all day long for old agent Servais.
Brian, what about you? I mean, overall, like, how do you feel like the layoff's going to help the Mariners or hurt them? And then also just that decision to go to Robbie Ray, you couldn't have drawn it up any better.
Yeah. So I think I'm with you, James, more than Andy on the layoff. Baseball players like routine, and an full off day in an opposing city in the middle of playoffs is out of routine. I don't think they're going to listen to the pundits and what they say. They're going to listen to what's in their head, and they're going to wake up this morning, instead of saying, all right, we got a game today. We're going to go play this game today and win the game and everything's good. They're like, oh, I got to relive that in my head again, watching that ball go 434 feet. That being said, the last 3-run home run to take in playoff 3-run home run to take a stream from a 2-run deficit to a win in Minute Maid Park is one we know a little too well. That's the Albert Pujols home run. And Minute is your next day starting pitcher and his desire for a free tractor. So if you get any rumors that the Mariner owners are going to offer a tractor to Luis Castillo, I would be very worried about Game 2. So the effects of these tend to be smaller for players because they get to play the game and do their regular stuff in the game. They're bigger for us as fans because, hey, we get to talk about it, right? And it's fun to talk about it for us right now, and it's a nightmare to talk about it for Mariners fans.
Andy, before we move to game 2, the elephant in the room is that Verlander didn't pitch well at all, actually. And I was actually, when the Astros moved within 2, I would have gone to the bullpen then and been like, it's not your day, JV, but we've got these array of arms with the day off tomorrow. What's your concern level if now JV has to pitch against the Mariners? Let's say it goes 5 and it's a closeout game.
Nil. I mean, is there a number less than 0? Because that's what it would be. I think what you saw, what we were all kind of worried about, and listening to Monday's show, which was very good. Glad I wasn't on it to slow it down. Was this idea that having 7 days off for a pitcher that is such a creature of habit wasn't going to be the best idea for him. And I think you saw that everything was just a little bit off. And in baseball, that little bit is everything. That little bit is the difference between holding the Mariners to 1 run versus giving up 6, letting that Punch and Judy shortstop that they have sitting in Seattle hit a towering home run. He has 8 home runs for the entire season, and it's not like he's missed massive amounts of time. Verlander was off. I do not expect to see that Verlander again, maybe until the World Series where he tends to collapse a lot, which we'll talk about if we get there. But if he's the game 4 starter, I'm very, very confident with him, his ability to have a very different result on the road, because I think that was a lot more his inability to make his pitches than it was the Mariners doing anything special.
Brian, what about you? You want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I basically agree with most of Andy there. That, my concern level is very little. Players tend to regress to their means when they have either good outings or bad outings, and Verlander's mean is a lot better than what we saw yesterday. The other thing to sort of note is what was Justin Verlander doing in the bottom of the 9th inning when Yordan hit that home run? He was in the film room studying his outing, which is not surprising, right? Because it's unclear that anyone works harder than Justin Verlander at his craft. So whatever sort of flaws he have, he'll work very quickly to fix them, because that's what he's done all through his career. It's one of the reasons his ability to adjust and fix flaws quickly is one of the reasons he's going to the Hall of Fame.
I think my favorite part of that story is he started to come out of the clubhouse in the 8th inning and realized I better stay in there because we're starting to come back. Even Justin Verlander's got a little bit of that superstition. So that brings us up tomorrow.
He's not superstitious, but he's a little stitious.
A little stitious, yeah.
Lots of stitches.
So that brings us to tomorrow. One of the things that everybody's talking about is Luis Castillo is expected to dominate the lineup, blah, 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 blah. I approach this from 2 different angles. One, no one's talking about Fromber and what he's going to do that lineup, but also, of all the Mariners pitchers, as I recall, the Astros actually had the worst numbers against Logan Gilbert, and they did actually hit him very well. Not only that, but they hit that bullpen up and down. Brian, we'll start with you on just the sort of Castillo versus the Astros angle. What are your thoughts going in? I mean, I know the media has to tell a story, but the story is there's no chance will this series at least go 4.
Yeah. Remember that some of reaction is to what happened last time, and particularly last time under the spotlight, in which Luis Castillo had a really good game in Toronto, which every baseball member of the baseball media saw or paid attention to. They didn't pay attention to Framber Valdez's start on the last day of the season for obvious reasons. It wasn't a very important game. But if you look at the numbers across the season, Framber is not a huge advantage, but a slightly better pitcher over this season than Luis Castillo. So this is mostly an even or slightly advantage to the Astros on the mound. And, but we'll see how they execute, how they sort of actually pitch, because, hey, we've seen plenty of aces. Verlander, Max Fried yesterday, Max Scherzer, not have good starts this postseason. Sometimes it happens, but Framber's pitched very well on most every occasion he's been out this season. I expect him to pitch very well tomorrow.
The other thing too, when you think about pitching stats, Andy, and I'll have you weigh in on the Fromber thing, but also this it seems to me that Service going to Robbie Ray with 2 outs and 2 on doesn't show a lot of trust in the rest of his bullpen. And, they did have the benefit of 2 days off. So it isn't like they were coming off of where there just weren't a lot of guys available. It does seem like a problem the Astros aren't going to have. Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, first of all, and I think I read it in a really good Substack article. Can't remember who the author was. The Mariners bullpen is good, not great. And I think they've had one of the things Service has done well is take advantage of pitching guys in spots they're going to be successful and being able to kind of pick and choose who he's going to put in what situation. You lose some of that ability in a 5-game series because you're going to see guys over and over again. There's more immediacy. And even their big ace, Munoz, out of the bullpen, got hit around, even though he managed to leave with a lead and survive. Bregman wasn't fooled by anything that he did. So I think it's a strength that the Astros have that the Mariners. It's something they do well. It's not as good as what the Astros can do from a bullpen perspective. And knowing that their starters are all of them in their first playoff experience, you literally don't know what you're going to get. We saw it with facing the Braves last year, and I can't remember the pitcher right now who dominated us in his second start, but in the first start got knocked around pretty good because of nerves and because of the adjustment and all those other things. You could see that with a lot of the guys that the Mariners are going to be throwing at us. And so I think Service was hoping that a veteran who had been in the playoffs, who had some experience, would bring a calming influence and be able to get Yordan Alvarez out. And he did. He got him right out of the park.
He only threw 2 pitches, so he's available, Brian.
Yeah, and it had been a plan of the Mariners. They've only got one left-handed in their bullpen in Matt Boyd. It had been their plan. This is something they had worked on the last 2 days to plan that, and we think the right strategy is to bring Robbie Ray in at times for the Yordan, Bregman, Tucker pocket to get the platoon advantage against two lefty hitters. So the Mariners have usually been really good at the bullpen decisions, sort of maximizing the good parts of their bullpen. They obviously weren't yesterday.
Andy, on the show on Monday, and we'll start with Andy, then we'll go to Brian. Brian said one of the best things that could possibly happen for the Astros bullpen going forward was to get Abreu and Hunter Brown some actual, real, tangible experience. So the first time they're throwing, it's not what Robbie Ray faced. How impressed were you with both of those guys? And also, how well does it bode knowing we also got through that game without Presley, without Neris and all of those guys?
I mean, we really without your core bullpen, the end of your bullpen guys. No Presley, no Neris, no Stanek. Montero was there. He was kind of the exception to that.
No Maton.
Lockers everywhere, breathing a sigh of relief.
Not going to be a happy Thanksgiving this year for Phil when he goes
It's
home.
not. I would like to be
even a little bit.
Now.
Wow, I'm distracted by that image now. Just a whole bunch of people not smiling at turkey. This is great. It's not dry at all. Anyway, the bullpen, I think it's a good situation that they got exposure. And I think as bad as Verlander pitched, the bullpen pitched that well because those last 6 innings they allowed 3 hits, 1 run on a home run that Minute Maid Park special, but that counts just the same.
So it was
yeah. But there was literally no threat after Verlander came out that the bullpen wasn't able to handle. That's great for us because yes, you might have a starter falter, but you've got so many weapons coming out of the bullpen, so many that Dusty elected to go with 12 pitchers, which not really his norm because he could have taken 13, chose to bring an extra bench guy, which good for David Hensley and frankly, good for us yesterday because that walk nobody's talking about. That was huge. Pena not being able to finally hit a slider the first time in a really long time. That was huge because Yordan doesn't get up if those things don't happen. But back to the bullpen, I think that's nothing that happened yesterday bodes poorly for our bullpen. against the Mariners. And that plays out with how the season went as well, matching up with them.
Brian, do you want to, I know you wrote a lot, you wrote exhaustively about this on your Substack. Do you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, and two names I didn't put on my Substack when reviewing the bullpen were Brian Abreu and Hunter Brown. And the reason for that is the Astros bullpen is so deep. That is the fifth? We went to the fifth, sixth, and seventh best options possibly out of our bullpen. Because we're losing, you don't want to go to the best options in that situation. And they pitched great, which is how they pitched in the regular season, all three of those guys. So it just shows you how deep the Astros bullpen is. They were able to get tons of inning out of their bullpen without touching three of their four core arms. And if you got, an ideal world would be six from Fromber and inning each from Stanek, Neris, and Presley, and handshakes and high fives.
One of the things I wanted, and now we'll start with Brian. We're doing the serpentine thing today.
Sure.
We have spoken on this show all season about the very kind of fitful, not consistent Astros offense. And we have seen that they have the ability to turn it on when it matters. How encouraged are you to see again that they hit up and down that bullpen? There was not a single pitcher that came out there that I think escaped truly unscathed. Is this offense, you think, finally starting to get it rolling?
I don't know if it's finally starting to get it rolling, but one thing this offense has always done well is they chase very little and they make a lot of contact. Now,
that's like my high school dating career.
Yeah. Now, Yuli made hard contact yesterday, which is different. And that's a big key. That's not something we've seen, right? But they get anything out of him, it really lengthens the lineup. But their sort of strengths as an offense put stress on opposing pitching staffs, even having taken a step back in their offensive capabilities this season. So they're capable of scoring 8 runs in a game, and sometimes they need to, like yesterday. I still expect this to be a mostly low-scoring series.
Andy?
Was there a question? I'm sorry.
Just your thoughts as well on the whole offense now. Is it turning itself on?
Oh, that thing. It's always going to be hard to say. I'm a little bit nervous about, and I know we're going to talk about Thursday matchup in probably just a second, but historically as an Astros fan, especially the last 5 years, we always get very nervous about facing a pitcher we haven't seen, especially if they happen to be a AAA call-up that nobody has any book on, and it takes us forever to adjust to that guy. Second time we see that guy, we knock him around the park, but very often we get stuck. And towards the end of the season, we got a lot more consistent when we weren't seeing those guys, but that's still a bugaboo. And that's one of the things that concerns me about Luis Castillo. He's been in the league for a long time. People have books on him. You have scouting reports on him, but only 4 of our batters have ever faced him. There's only been 10 at-bats. And good news, Mauricio Dubon is hitting 500 against him in 2 appearances.
He's going to be in that starting lineup, isn't he?
Well, I mean, compared to putting Mancini in the lineup again, maybe.
We're going to get to Mancini in a second.
But, yeah, I think that the offense is becoming more consistent, and you're going to have less mix and match with the lineup, less playing around. I think we've figured out that Pena needs to be in the 2-hole. He's going to be more consistent there. I think we've settled on Alvarez, Bregman, Tucker being that 3-4-5 that we're going to build everything else around. And honestly, the parts after that are kind of interchangeable, not necessarily in a good way all the time. But, and I say that, Yuli Gurriel had a great day yesterday. And
Chas McCormick had a good day yesterday.
Yeah, do that 10 more times. Now, why you take McCormick out of the game, it's a whole different thing, Dusty. But, I think that the offense is just going to be better the longer they play together, just like any other offense. And I think we're kind of at the point of hitting our stride. All that's to be said. We scored 8 runs yesterday. Altuve only got on base by a walk, didn't get any hits. We're going to talk about Trey Mancini. Very little from the bottom part of the lineup outside of McCormick. So, there's room to get better too. So that's kind of the interesting thing.
Brian, we'll let you go. We'll let you take the Mancini question first. Then I was one of those guys. Remember when we got traded? I was like, I will play Mancini, and he had his about as good a first 3 days as you can with a team.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense to basically move Yordan back to DH and Diaz to left field, or the other way around? But does it make sense to get Diaz more at bats over Mancini?
I mean, part of Mancini's issue has been rotten BABIP luck. I looked at this in the final six of the season, and he was striking out at a rate very similar to he had throughout his career. He was still taking double-digit walks. He didn't have as much power as he should have, but his BABIP was in the 100s, I think. So he's frustrated. The question is, does he stay to himself? The difference between Mancini and Diaz, though, in sort of what you might project from them, is relatively small. It still favors Mancini, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Diaz in the lineup either in game 2 or game 3. Maybe it's a Mancini reason, or maybe just it's hey, we want to make sure he gets some at bats because we will need him later in the series, later on, and don't just want him to be a pinch hitter.
I definitely hear what Brian's saying, Andy, but one of the things about Diaz has been he seems to be clutch when it's needed. And I almost wonder, you talked about this is Mancini's first playoff run. Is he dealing with nerves and jitters that maybe Diaz wouldn't if we had him starting?
I don't know if it's so much nerves as it is just he's in a horrible slump right now. He closed September and October 13 for his last 88 at bats. That is a 148 average for those of you that care, with a 535 OPS. None of those are good numbers. The BABIP was 175 for those of you that care in September and October. And he went 0 for 4 yesterday, left 3 guys on base, runners that were in scoring position, as I recall. So he's in a rough spot. I think I am rooting harder for him than I am just about anybody else on the lineup, because stats aside, he's a good guy. He's got a great story. He is fully bought into being in Houston and being an Astro. Christian Vasquez also, by the way, was out there jumping around like an idiot. So these are not guys, because I know there was a lot of these guys don't really want to play in Houston. And how did because you shoved a microphone in the guy's face 5 seconds after he found out he was traded, and he didn't respond the way you wanted him to. So that's been a thing with Vasquez.
Blame Astros and Red Sox PR officials, not
Vasquez. That's just a horrible thing. But Mancini's a guy I am openly rooting for. Bad luck doesn't last forever. His career suggests that he will at some point start hitting, but you also have a series to win. And at this point, I would trust Diaz more. It's going to be interesting to see Thursday who's in the starting lineup in left field, because you've got a ground ball pitcher, which normally means Yordan's playing left. Mancini could play left, but you don't really need a left fielder when Fromber's pitching. So it'll be interesting to see if that's kind of his last shot at getting at bats for a little bit, because I'd rather see Diaz in left field, frankly, when we get to Seattle, when a much bigger left field to patrol. But yeah, I just feel for the guy, because you can see it. I saw it that last game of the season where he's just trying to get anything to happen, and everything's rolling out to third or short. And it doesn't even feel like he's close. It's not like Tucker goes through his stretches of I'm hitting the ball really hard, but it's right at guys, or guys are making fantastic plays. This guy's just rolling over on everything, and it's easy ground outs. And I mean, I'd play Diaz if it were me.
Yeah, and I think I do agree. Like, he's been so vocally excited about being here. It's such a bummer to watch it happen. We have a little bit of other news to discuss. So before we do that, let me get a prediction from you guys for tomorrow's game. Brian, are we leaving here up 2-0?
Yeah, Fromber shoves 4-2 Astros.
Andy?
It's a bullpen game, 2-1 Houston.
All right, I've got 4-1 Houston. The biggest news, I guess not the biggest news, some big news is that Joe Espada is in fact interviewing for 2 managerial positions. Obviously, we'll have plenty of time to discuss that after the season. But Andy, where would you put the percentage likelihood that he's gone?
probably about 70-30 gone to stay. I think it's one thing to take the cursory interview, and he's done that over the last couple of off seasons and stayed with Houston. But I got to think if a club like the White Sox, who underperformed this year, offers him that job, you have to take it. There's no reason not to take it unless there's some deal that he has with Houston. And if that's the case, why is he interviewing? The Marlins are a different story. I think everybody interviews for the Marlins. You may have an interview set up with the Marlins right now. I have no idea. But that's kind of like being a hot offensive coordinator. And my first job my first job is going to be Rutgers. It's a no-win situation. The ownership's not going to set you up to win. If it were me, that's not a job that I would go disrupt my very comfortable life in Houston for. The White Sox, I think, are a different story, and I could see that being a big draw for him if he gets that offer. On the other hand, the White Sox make really weird decisions, like almost hiring A.J. Hinch and instead hiring Tony La Russa. So who knows what's going on the south side of Chicago. But I hope, somehow that Joe Espada is the one leading our team out on the field next year and not seeing him when we go to Comiskey. Or New Balance or whatever the hell that field is called.
I think it's Guaranteed Rate Field.
Whatever. They have horrible commercials with Rodon.
Yeah.
It's a curious place for the Astros right now because it's unclear that the manager is coming back next year. It is unclear that the general manager is coming back next year. The number 2, the assistant general manager, has left for essentially another assistant general manager job. And the number 2 guy in the dugout is interviewing again.
Ladies rely on
for other jobs. So it's just a period of instability in the Astros front office. I don't know where it leads. We have to sort of read Jim Crane's mind. And that's been one is he doesn't provide us a lot of what's going on in his mind, particularly sort of the end of this year. And it's hard to sort of understand the decisions, what he seems to be setting up to be making. What I do know is the instability in that seems not to affect the stability of the team itself. And that's a real important thing here in the postseason.
All right, guys. Well, again, I think we're looking at going up 2-0. Either way, you win the first game in a 5-game series. Like Andy pointed out, you have about an 80% chance.
72. Don't overstate it.
Okay, I guess you know what it is. It's Fangraphs has us at 80% now to win.
Yes, because
we were 8% above. It was 58% walking in, so add 8% to 72. There's your 80%.
Right. Yeah. I went to film school, but until next time, go Stros.
They teach math classes at other parts of the University of Texas where I learned stuff like that. Go Stros.
Bring your combat pots if you're sitting in right field. Go Stros.
And as we wrap up again, here's another look at Yordan's monstrous home run.
0-1 la cuenta, el zurdo. Viene, batazo le del jardín izquierdo. Atrás va la bola. Se va de cuadrangular. Yordan Álvarez lo hace una vez más para el equipo de Houston.